August 25th, 2021 meeting of the Woodbridge Township Board of Education will please come to order. Roll call, Ms. Rooney.
Ms. Bourdain? Here. Mr. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Here.
Mr. Velez?
Here.
Ms. Anderson?
Here. Ms. Rooney, as required by the Sunshine Law, please read the notice of meetings.
Thank you, Madam President. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this Act, the Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted as follows. On July 27th, 2021, emailed to the Home News Tribune, the Star Ledger, and the Municipal Clerk's Office, posted at Ross Street School Number 11, the Board of Education Administration Building, and also published on the school district website.
Mr. Velez, please read the closed session statement.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to motion for the approval of the following closed session statement. In compliance with the Sunshine Law, the board must go into closed session in order to discuss subjects exempted from the public portion of our meeting. Discussions to be held in closed session will be regarding personnel matters. In addition, the board will need to discuss the corrective action plan and legal response to the OFAC Collaborative Federal Desk Monitoring Report. Any information regarding the closed session discussion will be released to the public when the reasons for discussing these matters in closed session no longer exist.
I have a motion by Mr. Velez.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Treebwasser. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carried. Please rise for the salute to the flag and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do I have a motion to reconvene?
So motion.
I have a motion by Mr. Harris,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Treebwasser. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Roll call, Ms. Rooney.
Ms. Bourdain? Here. Mr. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Tamburello?
Apologize for being late. Here.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Here.
Mr. Velez?
Here.
And Ms. Anderson?
Here. Will someone make a motion to approve the minutes of the previous meetings?
So motion.
I have a motion by Mr. Treebwasser,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Harris. Are there any additions or corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Carried. Ms. Rooney, please state for the record any notices of bids received by the board.
Madam President, there are no bids at this time.
Thank you. The public is invited to speak at the conclusion of each agenda. Comments at this time should be limited to the items on the agenda being presented. When you come to the microphone, please provide your name and the section of the township in which you reside. As for Regulation 1100D, comments must be limited to no more than 5 minutes. No response will be given until you have completed your opportunity to speak. Superintendent's agenda. Dr. Massimino, do you have any recommendations?
Madam President, I have 20 items to present to the board.
Do I have a motion for the superintendent's agenda?
So motion.
I have a motion by Mr. Treebwasser,
Second.
seconded by Ms. Bourdain. Dr. Massimino will discuss the OFAC monitoring and the corrective action plan.
Thank you, Madam President. Based on the 2021 school year, we received a report as part of the Collaborative Federal Desk Monitoring Report with several suggestions as it relates to our spending with title funds. We've developed a plan to address the suggestions made by this Collaborative Desk Monitoring to address how the information is disseminated to those parties targeted with the Title A funds, specifically our ELL students and our economically disadvantaged community, as well as working with the business administrator to make sure that the documentation of said funding is appropriately documented. So said report is attached. Thank you.
Are there any comments or questions from the board? Are there any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Ms. Rooney?
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes. Policy and Planning, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Madam President. The Policy and Planning Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, presents the following 8 items. I move the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Harris,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Treebwasser. Are there any comments or questions from the board?
Ms. Anderson?
Mr.
I
Harris.
just want to recognize item number 8 for the general public. We have amended our school calendar for the upcoming school year. It's simply affecting the month of June of 2022. Please note item number 8 on your agendas, which everyone should hopefully have a copy of. June 7th, the primary date for the election, since 16 of our 25 schools are polling sites. The school district will be closed on that particular date, similar to the general elections that typically take place in November. June 20th is now a new federal holiday recognizing Juneteenth. As you all know, our school calendar reflects all federal holidays. Thus, the 180-day requirement is pushed back to Wednesday, June the 22nd. So just want to note those and thank the district for making those adjustments.
Are there any comments or questions from the public?
Good evening, Tom Maris, Ford, New Jersey. In regards to policies and planning, I don't see it specifically listed in here, but would it be under, just a question for my edification, I'll know better to ask correctly the next time if I'm wrong, but for policies and planning, is there anything in the current policy or planning that allows for cameras within the classrooms so that parents can see what is going on within the classrooms? We know we've had off-site teaching through that, but can that be extended? And is that a question that falls under policies and planning?
What item are you talking about on the agenda? We're talking about the agenda right now.
Well, I'm talking about the policies and planning within that. Is that something that falls under the purview of policy and
What
planning?
item number are you asking about?
General.
General?
Yeah, it's a
No.
general question about whether that is in the policy and planning. I'm assuming this is not the entire policy and planning manual, so I'm asking if it falls under that purview.
Right now, we're moving our agendas. The question has to be on the agenda item. You have to ask your question where we're not moving the agenda.
Okay, so right now, that is not open for discussion, but that, if I understand you correctly, that is where it would be if it were going to be a matter for discussion this evening?
Yes,
or
it
any
has to be
other
an
evening.
item number on the agenda, the policy and planning agenda.
Okay,
can
thank you
ask
for the
question now.
clarification.
Roll call, Ms. Rooney?
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes. Curriculum agenda, Mr. Treebwasser.
Thank you, Madam President. The Curriculum Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction, presents the following 27 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Treebwasser,
Second?
seconded by Ms. Bourdain. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Are there any comments or questions from the public?
Again, Tom Maris, Ford, New Jersey. Just to be sure, we are on talking about curriculums. Is that not correct?
We're on the curriculum agenda.
Okay. On page 2 of the curriculum, under L, I see that the board has now adopted and then putting forth the diversity and inclusion, equity and inclusion, I'm sorry. That's under letter L.
What letter L? Our
Page 2.
agenda has numbers. What number are you referring to?
Okay, the subject is L, incorporate instructions on diversity and inclusion in the appropriate place in the curriculum of the students in grades kindergarten through 12. This shall,
Mr. Amaris, what item on the agenda are you referring to?
it's L, item 1, 2, and 3. Do you not have the same document that I have? We're talking about curriculum adaptation,
No,
and you don't have an L.
no.
Is that today's agenda?
That's today's agenda, August 25th.
It's the one I picked up, August 25th, it was on the chair there.
And the curriculum agenda is after the calendar. So right after the calendar, you'll see the curriculum agenda, and it's numbered.
Does anybody else have this or not?
And we have 25 items on the agenda.
It's on policy and
27? Yeah. Thanks, William.
Curriculum adaptation, I'm sorry.
Are you at policy and planning backup? I think you said policy. He's on policy and planning.
Is that back under? No, maybe it's.
Because that's what it looked like when he showed it, yeah.
Please forgive me, my faux pas. It is actually under policies and
Planning backup.
planning, which I should have addressed at that point in time. I thought it would be under curriculum, which one might reasonably expect it to be. I guess that matter is now closed. We can't speak to it.
Yeah, we just moved the policy, we just voted on the policy agenda.
All right, we'll save it for the open period. I'm sure others will have questions about it as well, and I hope they
Sure.
come forth to ask about it. Thank you.
Yeah. Roll call, Ms. Rooney?
Ms. Bourdain? Yes. Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes. Finance and Insurance, Mr. Tamburello.
Thank you, Madam President. The Finance and Insurance Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and Business Administrator, Board Secretary, presents the following 12 items. This evening, I move for the adoption of the foregoing 12 items.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Tamburello, seconded by Mr. Treebwasser. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Are there any comments or questions from the public?
Just simple question, John Bertalik, Woodbridge proper. On insurance, I understand we have a couple of lawsuits against the school board. I would like to know who is the insurance carrier? How many years do we?
Excuse me, sir, what item on the agenda are you asking your question about?
Finance and insurance.
What item number on the Finance and Insurance agenda?
I don't see it over here, but it's. I don't see it here, but I'm talking about
Okay,
finance.
so we're moving the agenda, so you can only ask questions during this period of the meeting on items that are listed on the agenda.
I don't have it here. I'll come back. Thank you.
Thank you. Roll call, Ms. Rooney?
Ms. Bourdain? Yes. Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes. Security and School Safety, Mr. Velez.
Thank you, Madam President. The Security and School Safety Committee, on the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, present the following one item. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Velez,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Treebwasser. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Are there any comments and questions from the public? Roll call, Ms. Rooney?
Ms. Bourdain? Yes. Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
And Ms. Anderson?
Yes. Technology, Mr. Velez.
Thank you, Madam President. The Technology Committee, on the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction, present the following four items, and I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Velez,
Second.
seconded by Ms. Bourdain. Are there any comments or questions from the board?
Yeah.
Are there any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Ms. Rooney?
Ms. Bourdain? Yes. Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes. Athletics and Extracurricular Agenda, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Madam President. The Athletics and Extracurricular Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, presents the following 10 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Harris,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Tamburello. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Are there any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Ms. Rooney?
Ms. Bourdain? Yes. Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes. Buildings and Ground agenda, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Madam President. The Buildings and Grounds Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and Business Administrator Board Secretary, present the following 7 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Harris,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Treebwasser. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Are there any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Ms. Rooney?
Ms. Bourdain? Yes. Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
And Ms. Anderson?
Yes. Transportation, Ms. Bourdain.
Transportation Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and Business Administrator, Board Secretary, presents the following 6 items.
I have a motion by Ms. Bourdain,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Treebwasser. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Are there any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Ms. Rooney?
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes. Equity Commission agenda, Mr. Treebwasser.
Thank you, Madam President. The Equity Commission Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, presents the following 1 item. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Treebwasser,
Second?
seconded by Ms. Bourdain. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Are there any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Ms. Rooney?
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes. Personnel agenda, Mr. Treebwasser.
Thank you, Madam President. The Personnel Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Assistant Superintendent for Human Resource, presents the following 40... Sorry about that.
48.
48 items. 48 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
Thank you. I have a motion by Mr. Treebwasser,
Second?
seconded by Ms. Bourdain. Are there any comments or questions from the board?
Ms. Anderson?
Mr. Harris.
I want to recognize Dr. Massimino and the Personnel Office for item number 44, which will increase the substitute teacher pay, something that's long been sought by, members of the substitute teacher community. Sometimes we struggle to find some. Some of our rates were perhaps lower than some of our peer districts, and if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Massimino, we're now among the top 3, which will ensure that we'll get the quality substitute teachers that we need. So substitute teacher pay for high school and middle school will increase to $120 a day. Elementary school substitutes will increase to $130 a day, and our long-term substitutes will be paid $150 a day. So I want to thank Dr. Massimino for getting that accomplished. Thank you.
Are there any comments or questions from the public?
David Pinkowitz, Island. Just a quick question. Was the personnel agenda distributed to the public?
Oh, good question. Is it ready to go out? I'm sorry, Mr. Pinkowitz. Yes.
Oh, John, I wanted to ask you, on the agenda. Did you guys talk about the idea of Okay, all right. I just think there's...
Okay, okay, thank you.
We should be proud we're doing it, right? Should be. Thank you. Yeah, $25 at Under Armour, and if they measure your face, they're solid.
Okay, thank you. No, they're two-sided.
They're all saying, look at you. They were 8, right? That's what they were saying.
Madam President, I have to revise B and G. I forgot to abstain. I have to go back and revise B and G. Items 1, 2, and 3. Do you want to do that now while we're waiting?
Yes, good evening. Are we open for questions yet on
This is on the personnel agenda.
personnel? Exactly, yes. Trust me, I've got the right page. Point number 2, I note with regret that we're going to lose Assistant Superintendent John Bader. Apparently, he's going to be retiring after 31 years and 4 months of service. I certainly would take a moment to thank him for that service. I think he was an outstanding individual, is an outstanding individual, as are the others that are listed. But I know John, and I think very, very highly of him. I wish him all the success in his retirement. If we can then move down to point number 5, about a month ago, maybe perhaps a little longer, I had asked the board when Dr. Kendall was appointed, Kendall Ali that is, to his new position, what that salary was. It's not listed here. Can you identify that salary? And also, my other question is on point number 8, that there's been a salary adjustment for Dr. Zega down to $208,730. What is that down from? And does that include any bonuses, or are those not applicable at this point in time?
So item number 5 is appointing Kendall I. Leeds as Title IX coordinator. Your question is not about him being the Title IX coordinator?
Okay. Will that be available at some point in time? I'll just submit an open number and I'll offer it and then get it that way. Can you answer number 8, the salary adjustment for Dr. Zaga?
Okay, so we're going to have to get back to you on the specific number. Mr. Wolferman is not here today. We'll get back to you on the specific number on Dr. Zaga's salary, as well as the other salary you were asking about.
You have my contact information, or would you prefer I
You
submit a
can leave it
form
with
of
Ms.
ultra?
Rooney. Ms. Rooney, you can leave your contact information with Ms. Rooney, and we will contact you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure. Roll call, Ms. Rooney?
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
On item number 45, I'll be abstaining, voting yes on the remaining agenda.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Madam President? Madam President? I want to change my vote on item 45. I abstain as well.
Okay.
What? Okay, yeah.
Ms. Rooney, did you capture that?
I see that. Mr. Treebwasser abstaining on
Yes,
item
on item
45?
45.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes on all other items.
Okay.
Yes. Ms. Rooney, I need to go back to the Buildings and Grounds agenda.
Okay.
I need to go back to the vote for that. If you can run the roll call for that vote?
Okay. On Buildings and Grounds, Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
For items 1, 2, and 3, I need to abstain because I have a relationship with those companies.
Okay.
Yes on all others.
2 and 3. Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Okay.
Ms. Blackburn, do you have any recommendations?
Yes, I do, Madam President. I just wanted to make sure that the board and the public they most probably are aware that in the last 2 weeks, Governor Murphy has issued 2 executive orders affecting schools. EO 251 mandating masks in all school facilities, and EO 253 mandating vaccines for students, staff, volunteers, and anyone who has direct contact with children or will be in the buildings regularly, or have mandatory testing 1 to 2 times per week. The executive order provides all public, private, and parochial preschool programs in elementary and secondary schools, including charter schools and Renaissance schools, referred to as covered settings, must maintain a policy that requires all covered workers to either provide adequate proof to the covered setting that they have been fully vaccinated or submit to COVID-19 testing at minimum 1 to 2 times weekly. The requirement shall take effect on October 18th, 2021, at which time any covered workers that have not provided adequate proof that they are fully vaccinated must submit to a minimum of weekly or twice weekly testing on an ongoing basis until fully vaccinated. That's the end of my comment, Madam President.
Thank you. Is there any old business that should be brought to the attention of the board? Is there any new business that should be brought to the attention of the board? We will now open the meeting for public comment. When you come to the microphone, please provide your name and the section of township in which you reside. As per Regulation 1100D, comments must be limited to no more than 5 minutes. No response will be given until you have completed your opportunity to speak.
Good evening, Tom Maris, Ford, New Jersey. And thank you, Council President. I think you just hit upon the nerve by reading what you did about Governor Murphy's mandate. I think we all saw it in the paper. I'm sure the people here, and that's why everybody is here, to speak to this matter and how it affects the schools and our children. As I said, I'm Tom Maris. I make no bones about the fact that I'm running for the Board of Education. But that notwithstanding, I'm here as an individual who cares about this town, as I'm sure you do as well. And I want to take a moment to recite something that I saw on YouTube the other day, and that was the mayor of Clark, reminding all of his constituents that boards like this one and municipalities are under legal requirement to honor and follow the mandates of higher government. So even though you may have your own feelings, you have to thereby put those aside and follow the mandates that are given to you from the state government, be it the governor and or our legislative branch. That said, that does not mean we, the people, give up the right to come and speak. And I think everybody here tonight wants to avail themselves, or certainly has the right to be able to do that, and I hope they will. Because it is a very serious subject that we are facing. It's about individual liberties, but it's also about the safety and welfare of children, staff, the teachers, and the good of the community. And I hope everybody keeps that in mind, and that no one takes advantage to going after anybody else because they choose or not to choose, or choose not to be vaccinated, or to wear a mask or not wear a mask. We're going to have to do it, as we've had in the past, where it is so mandated. At this point in time, the school is honor bound, legally bound, to enforce that regulation, as you just so aptly pointed out. But as we all know, there's a great deal of confusion and misdirection and politicization of the whole mask and vaccine issue. I, for one, believe that every human being has a right to make that choice for themselves or their child. That said, again, they're going to have to go along with the system until such time as we can change that system. In that regard, I hope that after the board hears people this evening and gets the pulse of the community, you'll respond to the community in a manner that follows our wants, not those of the politicians that are sitting in Washington, D.C., or Trenton, New Jersey, for whatever power and glory they may seek, but honestly for the welfare, as I said, of the children. And it's a shame that we don't have the kids here to speak more about it too, because it impacts them. And they're really, at the end of the day, the ones that have to wear those masks all day long, as do the teachers. There's more than anecdotal arguments about how that affects a child physically and psychologically by not being able to communicate with facial expressions. Also, the fact that they have to breathe through that cloth device for 6-7 hours a day to and from school, while they're being transported in the school bus, within the classrooms. And certainly, we've all been children at one time. We know what children do. The idea that they're going to keep those things on and not be able to take them off or move around is, frankly, ludicrous. So how do we address that issue? What I would hope is that you're going to give parents the option, if they cannot, because as we just heard, the governor has said even private and parochial schools will have to follow his mandates. But can we not then give the parents in this community the operation to opt out and have their child taught the same way we did last year, via video, and let them stay home? And there again, I would ask that you install cameras within the classroom so that every parent can tune in and see what's going on. We've done that in the past, and I see no good valid reason why we can't have cameras there to watch what is being done, who's wearing what, and more precisely, because of the concerns over CRT, what our kids are being taught in regard to that. We don't have time to speak of it this evening. I tried, but I'll have to wait for another day. Again, I hope you'll listen to the voice of the community and honor everybody. Thank you.
David Pinkowitz, Island. With all due respect to the previous speaker, this isn't about liberty. Our country has allowed health regulations since its dawning. We've had vaccine mandates in the past. We've had quarantines in the past. We've required masks in the past. This isn't about liberty. This is about the health of our students and our community. Now, what I wanted to talk about, I'll get to the mask in a moment. I do want to encourage, and I spoke to or communicated with Dr. Massimino when he first took office, and he said the science, he would follow the science. And one of the things I wanted to talk about is vaccinations for the children. While there is no mandatory vaccinations of COVID-19 vaccinations for children at this time. I encourage the superintendent to use his bully pulpit to encourage the students, especially those that are 16 and over, where we have a now fully approved vaccine, but even for those that are 12 and above with emergency use authorization, to get vaccinated. It's been shown that, with all due respect to the people booing in the back, it's been shown scientifically by the scientific community and medical community the vaccines work. And where people have taken the vaccines in higher numbers, we've had lower numbers of COVID cases, lower numbers of COVID hospitalizations, and deaths. Now, I do want to thank the board president, who did encourage vaccinations in her note to the public, which I did read. Although I do want to encourage in the future for communications, I read the note linked on Facebook to a Colonia Corner article. It would be easier for more people to see the message if they didn't have to drill into an article to have the message directly. But I do want to thank the board president for making that message. I believe she's done it more than once. So, and I encourage the superintendent. Now, as to the masks. As I've said, there's an overwhelming scientific consensus on this point. And frankly, polls say 2/3 of New Jerseyans believe there should be a mask mandate in schools. But it's not about their vote. It's not about those people that are here and that will speak after me, or even what I have to say. What matters is that there's evidence, a lot of evidence, that community-based efforts like masking can help to reduce the chance of catching COVID-19. It may not eliminate it, but if it slows it down, that's still better than the alternative. And this isn't about saying, well, those that argue that it's about personal choice. The reality is that their personal choice affects the other students in the room. Because the masks don't solely protect the wearer, they protect those others who are in the same room as the wearer. So with all due respect to whatever anyone says after me, I don't think they're going to have scientific evidence. They're just going to argue that their child doesn't like a mask, or they don't like a mask, or they think it's their choice. And the reality is they could try to shout me down in the back, but that's where we are. The medical community, pediatric doctors, epidemiologists, CDC, are all in agreement that we should be masking. The governor has made that decision. The governor has also ruled out people opting out unless they have a medical reason supported by a doctor. And frankly, I think that's the right call. And I hope the board doesn't consider writing a letter, not that they would have any real authority, but I think it's just the wrong thing to do. The board's job is to protect the students of this district, 12,000 students, not just those that don't want to wear a mask. And frankly, I haven't found the children to be the problem at all. I've seen children wear masks generally without real argument. Most of the argument's coming from the adults. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Christina Moreno. I'm a community member of Woodbridge residing in Colonia, mother of two, and a frontline healthcare professional who has worked this entire pandemic. I'm one of those healthcare professionals, and I, sir, do not agree. The school board has announced to keep the mask mandate for our children this upcoming school year, and I'm going to start off with some facts. 4.2 million children have tested positive for COVID, in which 0.008 of them have died. In the 2018-2019 flu season alone, 480 kids have died. Did anyone here recommend a mask for the 2018 to 2019 school season for our children? Raise your hand if you recommended a mask. The recovery rate for children with COVID is 99.98%. Most children do not suffer from chronic disease. Children's immune systems is powerful and adequate, so why are we being forced to put masks on them? It is not to protect our children because they are not at risk. It is not to protect adults. They can be vaccinated if they choose to do so. is not to slow the spread of transmission rate in children, because the transmission rate is already very low. So if you believe your children are giving it to grandma and grandpa, I highly encourage you to educate yourself on the topic. The answer is to protect the school board politically. Everything being recommended by the CDC and State Board of Health is contrary to the rules of science. Something you should know about respiratory viruses, specifically coronavirus, is that they spread by aerosol particles, which are small enough to go through every single one of those masks. I'm a healthcare worker, I'm not anti-science. Anti-science is reading a label on a box of masks that says they do not protect against viral infections and still forcing our children to wear them anyway. Have you thought about the psychological damage done to children forced to wear a mask all day, teaching them that everyone around them is ill, that you must distance yourself from all your friends? What is it doing to the developing immune systems? Where are the long-term studies of the effects of children wearing a mask for 7 to 8 hours at a time? What about the elementary school children, specifically my daughter, learning to read and cannot see the face of their teacher? Our children are growing up with no socialization. They can no longer see emotion. The psychological effects of this will be severely damaging if this continues. Have you asked children how they feel after wearing a mask all day at school? Have any of you spoken to any of our children, asking them how they feel after sitting in class for 7 to 8 hours at a time with a mask? My son has begged me to unenroll him this year and homeschool him, and that's the route that we're planning to take. Take the mask off our children. It's our choice as parents. Let's be real. If COVID were hypothetically a real risk to our children, would any sane parent send their child to school? Who would put their child's life in the hands of a dirty, wet, spitty piece of fabric that they've probably worn all week? None of us. Give our children the freedom to breathe. If you have any questions on the statistics that I have provided, I have studies. I could send them to every single one of you. And if you're in support of this mask mandate, you should all be ashamed. Thank you for your time.
My name is Joanna. I live in Island. I am also a healthcare worker. I've been a registered nurse for 20-something years. Thank you for allowing me to speak. In light of Governor Murphy's gross overreach with the mask mandate after he said he would leave it up to the districts, I'd like to provide some actual data since he has provided none. In providing this data, I am not suggesting you defy the mandate. We're asking that you, as our elected officials, advocate for our families and children at the local level, as many other New Jersey districts are doing. The flu is more deadly to children than COVID. That is a fact, not an opinion. Children have never had to wear masks to stop the spread of the flu. There are 7 reported deaths of children from the American Academy of Pediatrics in the state of New Jersey. This is a mortality rate of, again, 0.001%. We have no idea what their medical history was. We live in a state of 9 million people. 358 children have died of COVID in the United States. 358. The population of the U.S. is over 331 million. While any child's death is devastating, these numbers are not cause for the amount of fear and panic we are seeing in school systems throughout the United States. The British Medical Journal released a study that children born during this COVID time have a lower IQ. They are not hitting their milestones at the expected ages. They are struggling to learn due to isolation and not being able to see adults' faces that are covered with masks. They are not seeing our mannerisms, our expressions, and our words, which is affecting their development. The science is not settled on masks. From the American Academy of Pediatrics, the amount of adolescents screening positive for depression increased from 5% to 6.2%. The depression screenings at primary care visits decreased from 77.6% to 75.8% post-pandemic. In simple terms, they screened for depression less, and we still have a 1.2 increase. Positive suicide risk screens increased from 6.1 to 7.1%. Now some questions. Why is it safe to take our masks off at crowded restaurants, but it's not safe for our kids to remove their masks at their desks? Who are the masks protecting? It's not the children. They are safe. It's the parents' responsibility, not politicians, to make decisions regarding their child's health. It is never the responsibility of a child to protect the health of an individual. Do we have any idea what kind of psychological damage is being done to these children, forcing them to cover their faces, teaching them the air is toxic and everyone is sick, instilling the the traumatizing fear that they're going to kill their grandparents, correct? Do you have no idea what damage is being done? What about the health effects of forcing a child to breathe through their gross masks all day? You wear it for a few hours a day and it feels disgusting. Imagine 7 to 8 hours. Or like us healthcare workers, 12 hours a day. These masks are political theater. You should be all ashamed of yourselves, so stop playing politics with our children's health and education. Each and every single individual should have the right to choose what is best for their child. This mandate is not affording us that right. We demand that you, as elected officials, fight for our community and our parental rights. To my fellow community members, the next Board of Education election is November 2nd, with 3 seats up for election. We need to get out and vote because these people will clearly sit idly by while the governor strips us of our parental rights.
My name is Kristen Masenik-Selecki. I'm from Woodbridge proper. I'm the mother of twin 7-year-olds entering the 2nd grade at Mulvey Elementary School this year. And I'd like to begin by thanking this board, the past superintendent and the current superintendent, as well as all the teachers and educators for everything they did over the past 18 months to help our kids survive and excel during this pandemic. Notice I said during this pandemic. This pandemic is not over. This is not the time to let our guard down. I came tonight because I knew parents would be here asking you to go against the CDC guidance and governor's mandate for masks in the school, and I wanted my voice to be heard, asking you to uphold the mandate and to keep our children safe until they could be vaccinated. I, like many other parents, made the difficult decision to keep my children home since March of 2020. I'm ready for them to return to the classroom as much as the next parent, but my goal is to do this safely for them and the staff and educators. While yes, the vaccine has helped lower the risk of death and the numbers in our area, the disease still exists and our children can't yet get the vaccine. The only thing we as adults can do to protect them is to get vaccinated, wear masks, and ensure they wear masks. History has proven masks work. Over the past year, when you look at where the disease numbers went down the fastest and stayed down, it's where mask mandates were in place. But an August 12th report from the American Academy of Pediatrics suggests that the share of COVID-19 cases cropping up in children and teens is increasing nationwide. Over the course of the pandemic, kids made up about 14.4% of the cases. In the week ending August 12th, they made up 18%. As of today, 22%. They are up 48% in the last week alone. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommended that when parents of unvaccinated children are making decisions about going out into the community, they need to behave as if nobody in the household is vaccinated. I know my family still behaves as they did a year ago. We avoid crowds. We don't eat in restaurants. We wear our masks in indoor spaces and crowded outdoor spaces. We appreciate that the schools are acting the same way. People wanted facts? Let's consider the facts. Dean Bloomberg, the chief of pediatric infectious diseases at the University of California Davis Children's Hospital, says in Scientific America that even before vaccines were available, making mask mandates in schools worked quite well. During the 2020 and 2021 school year, before Delta was circulating widely, where school mask mandates were in place, viral transmission was limited. A report of North Carolina schools earlier this year identified only 363 cases of in-school transmission among masking was in a district of over 1 million students, and staff at 100 school districts and 14 charter schools where that masking was mandated. What is key is that children can follow the masking guidance and does, and evidence suggests that more than 90% of school children do so. Since school opened in LA this year, where masks are mandated, there were fewer than 2,000 cases among more than 500,000 students and staff. And most of them were contacted outside of the school district. But let's look at what's happened where masks weren't mandated over the last few weeks. Thousands of students who have returned to school across the U.S. are already in quarantine after having been exposed to COVID-19. All 53 fourth graders at the Patrick Henry School of Science and Arts in Richmond, Virginia have been quarantined after 4 students reportedly tested positive for COVID-19. The students go to school virtually until they're cleared. No mask mandate was in place. In South Carolina, a school district of 126 students and 22 staff members tested positive the first week back at school, resulting in more than 600 students and 7 staff members having to quarantine. People here are asking for facts. Those are the facts. Let's look at the recent Woodbridge numbers. There's 22 reported cases in the past 24 hours. That's facts. It's up to us as adults to set an example of behavior for our children. This is not a political game. This is a pandemic, and our response needs to continue to be based on scientific facts. And the facts show masks work. Here's what else the facts show. Bullying exists. And right now, my 7-year-olds have no issue wearing their masks. They wore it to baseball camp this summer. They wear it to the grocery store. They wear it to school, to church, to Legoland, and they don't complain, and they don't have a problem with it. They know when to dispose of it. They know how to wear it correctly. They don't wear it under their nose. They're 7 years old, and they don't question it. They question me when they see people without it on. And quite frankly, what they're saying is, let's be clear, I agree with Scientific America when they said that without clear health standards such as mask mandates, there can be a toxic environment where you have bullying and stigmatization because your child is wearing a mask. That's what I fear. That if they come back, if that's the example set by the parent, there's no surprise. We scar these children for life when we put them in these kinds of terrible situations. In our responsibility as adults to make efforts to keep this type of activity and toxicity low. I'm advocating that we put our children's safety first and continue to require the masks until they can be vaccinated safely. There is no proof that masks are bad for the kids. There is proof that not wearing them is. And I appreciate you continuing to support the mask mandate. Thank you.
Hi, Amber Jarrett, Woodbridge proper. While I certainly believe there are a lot of things the district could and should improve upon, I do want to commend the leadership. I think during the pandemic, you have, for the most part, prioritized the physical health and safety of both students and staff, and I appreciate that as a parent and as an educator. I do have a question, though. It's nothing to do with the mask. Students are going to test positive, and I know one of the other mandates from Governor Murphy is that there will be no virtual option. You know, there's no hybrid, and as a teacher of kindergarten, I certainly have no desire to teach hybrid again, but what is the plan? What is the plan when students are going to inevitably, and staff, test positive and have to quarantine, or just have to quarantine because somebody in their family has? What is the plan, I guess, to continue instructional continuity? Because I know as a parent, it's something I would like to know ahead of time, as opposed to, you know, the day my child has to quarantine, finding out that, you know, there is potentially, you know, he just misses 2 weeks of school and that's it, he gets a packet. I don't know. I'm just curious if you have a contingency plan in place, or is that something, you know, that's being considered?
Dr. Messerino?
Are you done with your questions, Ms. Jarrett? Okay. So all superintendents, including the one you work for, have been given a time deadline in the middle of October to submit their quarantine instruction plans. We're not finalized with them because the staff hasn't come back, so we're building our roster of home instructors. What the governor's advice says is in his roadmap back is to keep it as continuous as possible. So right now we're looking at some kind of asynchronous instruction with an opportunity to have a live instruction. It's difficult to speak to specific terms. As a teacher, you know, you work during the day. If you were to be the instructor, the live instructor for your quarantining students, you would have to do that after hours. That would be consistent and that would work. If the teacher is not interested in doing that and they are your students for the year, then obviously we would look at a home instructor or somebody else that's familiar and certified in that area. So without the teachers back yet and the ability to speak to them as to what their availability, interest, comfort level is with that, we're going to continue to develop the plan with the principals into what we would like to offer. And then obviously it is dependent upon if those classroom teachers are or are not interested in doing that for their students. And if not, we will find a suitable person to do that for the students.
Quick question, what if, in theory, the entire class is quarantined? Or the staff member is quarantined? I mean, I guess you would get a substitute if the staff member is. And yes, I know that you have to have a plan. My district already has a plan. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, no. There's a lot of moving parts to it.
Yeah.
The first one, the quarantine time frame depends on what color our county, our area is at that point. We get that from the health department. So that would determine if an unvaccinated person were to quarantine for 14 days, if you were in an orange, if a yellow, 7 to 10 days. If you're vaccinated, the rules for quarantining change. So I don't want to try to avoid your question, but the variables of the scenario significantly impact the ability to address the scenario, if that makes any sense.
I guess I'm just thinking as an elementary teacher of elementary students who will not be vaccinated. So there's a probability that it could happen, that an
Absolutely.
elementary classroom could be quarantined. And I guess that's what I was getting at, because I know, you know, what our plan is, and I'm just curious, like, is instruction going to, I guess, move to the virtual, or?
So we cannot offer virtual instruction. That is part of the governor's executive order as well. In his roadmap back, he's very clear, full days, all week long, in person, no virtual option. So we're not going to try to back end it if it is and I'm calling it quarantine instruction because we're mandating the quarantine. So we're going to be very specific. You know, Mr. Jeffroy, the president of WTA, is here. We've had numerous discussions about this because I want to be in step with the teachers. The idea is this: last year we didn't have an opportunity to do this. So I'm always reluctant to not acknowledge, you know, I don't want to make perfect the enemy of better. I feel like we are in a better spot this year in being able to offer in-person instruction. Not having the virtual option does change things in a quarantine status. So we're going to work with our staff. I have the utmost faith and confidence in them. I think they've been tremendous throughout this. So when they come back, we'll have a discussion with them because these things are going to come up. It's the sheer nature of the pandemic, and we'll do our best to work through it with the teaching staff and the administration. Thank you, Mr. Jarrett.
Good evening. My name is Marley Nolan. I'm from Woodbridge proper. I have 2 young children in the district, including one at Mobby Street School. I want to thank you for allowing all of us to speak tonight. There are many important and impactful topics that we should be and could be discussing, but unfortunately, the topic at hand, the elephant in the room, is the masks. I would like to first thank Dr. Massimino for his support thus far in ensuring compliance with the executive order, enforcing mask wearing in the indoor premises of all schools. While the executive order is clear, I wanted to speak tonight to ensure that the voices of the minority do not drown out the voices of the majority who are actually in support of mask wearing at schools. This time last year, the priority seemed to be getting children back in schools. And while that was not an option at the time, we do have that potential now with what is a relatively simple requirement of wearing a mask. Many of us, including my family, stayed virtual for 1 year and 3 months in order to sacrifice and help limit the spread and protect our children. The time has now come to create a safe environment for students to attend school in person, and the data is clear that masking is the most effective option available at this time, especially for those younger than 12 who cannot be vaccinated. While some may reference anecdotal evidence against masking, there is zero proven, credible data indicating masking is harmful to children, either physically or psychologically. The American Academy of Pediatrics states that face masks can be safely worn by all children 2 years of age and older, including the vast majority of children with underlying health conditions, with rare exceptions. And that in addition to protecting the child, the use of face masks significantly reduces the spread of SARS-CoV-2 and other respiratory infections within schools and other community settings. I would also like to quote the CDC, who has stated that guidance emphasizes implementing layered prevention strategies to protect students, teachers, staff, visitors, and other members of household in support of in-person learning. We know that mask wearing will not prevent 100% of the spread, and that some children may not wear their masks perfectly. However, this is about doing something rather than nothing, and it's part of a multi-pronged strategy to reduce transmission. Some may reference the limited spread in prior years or death rates. I don't want to focus on death rates. No one wants children sick. We don't know the long-term effects of COVID. However, there's also greater distancing and significantly reduced in-person attendance last year. And more seriously, the Delta variant is proving more transmissible and more dangerous for children than past variants. If we look at the rates of COVID in children, the increases are terrifying. With the Delta variant, children are not just getting the flu and getting over it. While there are sadly many examples of this, let's just take one example. The suburbs outside of Atlanta, Georgia, where masks have not been mandated. Within the first 2 weeks of school, at least 19 of the school districts, 19, have had to temporarily shut down, pivot to virtual learning, or put in hybrid plans within days of opening classrooms due to COVID. The situation is so dire for Johnson County schools that the entire district is shifting to virtual learning until mid-September. They have 32% of the student population in quarantine, 30% of the school staff in quarantine, just in the first 2 weeks. I could reference many other states and counties, unfortunately. However, I hope the point is clear. Masks allow for in-person schooling, and we need to choose a priority. For those who believe it is a parent's choice, I would counter this is not an issue of individual's decision, as this is a situation where the actions and choices of others impacts my children and my family. Children are required to wear appropriate clothing and shoes, obtain other vaccinations and immunizations, wear seatbelts on buses. This is just another step taken to protect our children and ensure a safe and productive learning environment. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes famously said, "Your liberty to swing your fists ends where my nose begins." And given the respiratory spread of this virus, I don't think there could be a more suitable legal reference. Your freedom to opt in and out of mandates for your child ends where my child's health begins. This should not be a political issue. It's a public health issue. And I wish we could all go back to normal. None of us want to have the children wear masks, but that's the world we live in. So I'd like to thank the Board of Education Administration for allowing this time, and I thank you in advance for what I hope will be your continued courage to enforce policies that are truly in the best interest of our children and school staff.
Hi folks, good evening to the dais. My name is John. I represent Ward 3, which is Port Reading and Avenel. My background is environmental. I did environmental testing, consulting and engineering, as well as cleanup. I also dealt with COVID cleanup.
Excuse me, sir. Could you cover your, you have to put the mask on?
I'm 6 feet away from you and I know the rules because I do environmental. Do you do environmental? Do you do any who's OSHA certified?
Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, sir. The governor's mask order says masks have to be worn when you are in the public school building.
Was
Please.
that when school's in session?
No, it's in a school facility is the way that the...
It's very difficult. This is why kids are having a hard time breathing, and these parents are trying to tell you that. Do you realize 88,000 to 92,000 Woodbridge residents do not vote
Excuse
to
me,
3
sir.
years after?
Excuse me, sir. Please
What?
put your mask on
It is
and
on.
cover your nose. Please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. All right. 88,000 to 92,000 Woodbridge residents do not vote the years after a presidential election. Then you wonder why we have problems in this town with the Board of Ed and with the council in Woodbridge. They're building schools on contaminated property, but did they tell you that? No, they hide it. Do you know this board here and the councils in Woodbridge did not inform you about, now this is from an Ivy League school, you can look this up on your own. Princeton University was warning you back in January about this COVID coming. What did these people do in Woodbridge Council? They made sure they neglected you. They didn't tell you. They hid it. They kept it secret. They waited to March and April when things were out of control and everyone got sick. Many of you lost family members like me. Many of you have family members in hospitals for a long period of time. And if they did make it and come out, now they have bills of $75,000 to $80,000 they got to come up with. Many of you have friends and family that lost their jobs. But meanwhile, the Woodbridge Council and the Board of Ed kept giving themselves raises. These are the same people with the council kept hiring their friends and their family members into positions throughout township. So understand here, if you do not vote on November 2nd and start changing the culture of this type of attitude and the type of attitude of Woodbridge Council, your problems are going to get worse. You see what's going on now. Your health is at risk. Your safety is at risk. Because these people here, where I just got a message from 5 different parents today in Colonia High School, during orientation, the kids that were running orientation, and they know about it, were telling the kids how they're going to be bullied by seniors when they come back to school. All right? Ask them what they're going to do about that. Ask them what they're going to do. Calm down over there, all right? All right? So, all right.
Address
thank
the
you.
board.
I am addressing the board. All right? So tell me, why are you pushing for more schools to be built on contaminated properties throughout Avenel?
We're not doing that.
Well, you're not doing that. You're putting people's life at risk.
No, we're not.
Yes, you are. So tell me your background, how you can make a determination how the school's going to be put in what position. What kind of information are you getting to protect these people's kids and parents and teachers and officers that work there of not getting sick?
Excuse me, sir. Today, on today's agenda for the buildings and grounds, the board hired an LSRP.
And who's that? Today they just hired it?
The board approved the contract today.
Just today, but they've been doing all this work out there.
There is and has been an
No,
LSRP.
so you're supposed to have an LSRP before you do anything. Before you rip down buildings, before you move any dirt. Do you know that?
The LSRP.
Do you have any clue how it works?
There is an LSRP.
Because I'll tell you right now.
Excuse me,
if
sir.
anyone gets
Excuse me,
sick
sir.
in here,
Excuse me, sir.
they should sue you
Excuse
guys.
me, sir. The property.
Let her answer the question.
The property is still owned by the redeveloper. The redeveloper has had an LSRP.
They have, that's past tense.
They have and
they have.
had both.
What is it
The
now?
district today has hired its own LSRP.
Really? And who's that?
And it is.
And why did it take so long to hire?
Okay, your time is up.
She's asked me a
She's gonna
question.
answer
and
you,
guys
but your
kept
time
arguing
is
with
up.
me.
They have hired French and Perello Associates as a French and Perello as the third-party LSRP. They have hired and engineering services from YU and Associates.
Okay. Where can I get this information from?
It's in the board agenda.
It's on the board agenda? You
Yes.
have it? Okay.
It's in the board agenda, buildings and grounds, items 1 and 3.
And they just hired. Why did they wait so long to hire?
Excuse me, sir, your time is up.
She's asking me questions and I'm trying to get an answer.
She's not asking the questions. She answered your question.
No, she just hired today. I want to know why it took them so long. You're putting people's lives at risk. So we should know. You guys approved it. Why did it take so long to approve?
The board has not approved anything. Right now, the contract, the purchase and sale agreement is between the redevelopment agency and the redeveloper. The board is not a party to that contract.
You just said you hired a third party.
I did,
All right.
because the way that agreement is structured, the redevelopment agency can designate, but has not, the
You really know what you're
subsequent.
talking about, ma'am.
Yes, I do.
No,
Excuse
you
me,
don't.
sir. The subsequent owner. So the board is currently engaging in additional
You're playing
due
with
diligence.
words. You're playing with words.
Okay, sir, your time is up. She answered your question.
Okay, calm down there. Don't have the fit.
There's no reason to be disrespectful.
John Rotary, Woodbridge proper. I guess there was a lot of things we said tonight. A lot of intelligent people were here. I believe they can think for themselves what's better for their families, for themselves, and of course for their kids. I don't think it's anybody's decision to come from a vacation to go to a country that's most contaminated in Europe, and they come back and say, we got a problem. We got to go to school, we got to wear a mask. I was a month ago, we didn't have to. All of a sudden, there's an emergency. We know kids are healthy, kids are young. They're not influenced, they're not contaminated like old people. They have to build immunity, we all know that. We don't give them a chance. I know when my kids were small, they had what you call a trench mouth from eating dirt, so to speak. Grow up. You can't go to a most contaminated country in Europe on vacation and they come back, we got a problem, listen to New York, Connecticut. Yes, we got to get united to get it done. But What happens with the kids when they go home from school? Anybody looks what's happening in the streets? Do they wear a mask? What they do? What they play? Who they play with? And we talk about certain case of COVID-19 breaks out in the township. Find out from where, what part of the township, what neighborhoods, what causes it. You don't look into it. Just we got 29, 30 cases in 100,000 people. Yeah, more people got other diseases, probably more deadly than COVID-19. But again, it's up to the people. Let them decide. You just cannot mandate. You know, you can close I can close my business, I don't let people in. You can close the school, don't let them in. But people should decide how they want to treat with a kid. Explain to me, how do you going to have a 3-year-old kid goes to the kindergarten and wear a mask all day long? Think it's possible? It's not going to happen. Most important, when they eat, whatever, the kids are kids, they're always going to be our kids. But don't put us into the world, and we're going to now stop doing what we did before last year. More kids committed suicides than they died because of COVID, because of the COVID. Don't make a big thing. It's a big thing worldwide. But then don't travel. Don't go here, don't go there. People, the parents have to decide how they're going to cause this thing. I know you probably don't care if kids don't come to school. You just keep the school open, you come or not, but in the meantime, they're not being educated. You know it. We are failing to the rest of the world because the rest of the world doesn't take it as serious as we do. I know somebody personally in a foreign country is a diplomat. They didn't get a vaccine. Their kids didn't get a vaccine. But over here, Murphy comes back. Oh, it's emergency. Call the shots. Tomorrow, what New York does, New Jersey does day after. But let's talk about something else. I believe Mr. Harris reported a couple last meeting that you got schools over here that you build new schools. You got trouble with the air conditioning, clean air. You don't have air. You don't have air conditioning. That's going to cause more harm to the kids than COVID. You got to keep a school clean. When I went to school, the teacher would check your ears, check your hair, check your hands, everything else. That's how you're going to start any disease. Keep the school clean, fresh air, whatever you want to call it, that's what we have to do. But we just can't do this and make it a whole big deal like it's the end of the world and tell those people how to treat their kids and how to this and that, everybody else. I mean, this is not Afghanistan yet. But you can't do this what you're doing it. And don't listen. You said, Murphy said, no. It's not Murphy, it goes down, down, down. You people do what you're told. But give people a choice. They got to decide it. But don't tell them mandate that, well, if you don't do this, you can come to school. Or if you don't do this, you can do this. No, you don't do this. Because this is a public school, it's a people's school, and you're working for the people. And that's what we have to do. But we cannot just take it like it's, I mean, how could it happen overnight because 29 cases, 30 cases? I know as a foreigner, we are over-exaggerating on all these things. Today is high, tomorrow is going to be low. People know what to do, and they know how to do it. But don't mandate and don't kind of put us, because just go on the street after the meeting and see what happens. All those people who got a mask here, they're going to go probably to a diner or to this. They won't take it off. People that have other issues, they're the one in danger, yes.
Thank you, sir. Your time
But
is up.
let them take care of themselves. But don't tell people they don't have this kind of problem. Thank you.
Good evening, James Dabrowski, Woodbridge proper, proudly representing our local NAACP Perth Amboy area branch. I'm here tonight to commend the board and central administration for following Governor Murphy's health mandate to protect our students, staff members, and their families by adhering to the CDC's guidance for COVID-19 prevention in K-12 schools and ECE programs. It's reassuring to know that those charged with making decisions for my fourth grade son's education are listening to the experts and trusting the science. As a 16-year elementary school educator myself, we made masks work last year when we returned in person, and we'll make them work again this year for as long as necessary. While all of us look forward to the day when they'll no longer be needed, right now we have not only the opportunity, but the obligation to practice and model the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning's 5 core areas of competence: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. For those unfamiliar with social and emotional learning, or SEL, it's an integral part of education and human development. SEL is the process through which all young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to develop healthy identities, manage emotions and achieve personal and collective goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain supportive relationships, and make responsible and caring decisions. With that being said, it would be extremely irresponsible of us to follow the poor example of people like Homedale's Board of Education President Vicki Flynn, the Republican State Assembly candidate who wrote a letter to our governor urging him to drop the data-driven health mandate. This dangerous unmask our kids propaganda is frighteningly being pushed by the same people who peddled Stop the Steal, the big lie which led to January 6th's deadly white supremacist insurrection. It's no surprise that many of those who are here this evening to demand the district unmask our kids are the same people also fighting diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism initiatives. I'd like to also commend the board and central administration for your commitment to DEI and anti-racism. I've heard some of the past meetings where you've been criticized, even tonight, by certain members of the public for this vital commitment, with them trying to say that DEI is actually code for CRT or critical race theory. I'm sure they'll say SEL and culturally responsive teaching is also critical race theory, as it's important to understand that that's the whole strategy of that racist Republican misinformation campaign. It was concocted by a right-wing activist by the name of Christopher Rufo, who literally tweeted his twisted plan when he wrote on March 15th, "We have successfully frozen their brand, critical race theory, into the public conversation and are steadily driving up negative perceptions. We will eventually turn it toxic as we put all of the various cultural insanities under that brand category." The goal is to have the public read something crazy in the newspaper and immediately think, critical race theory. We have decodified the term and will recodify it to annex the entire range of cultural constructions that are unpopular with Americans. And of course, by Americans, Rufo means his fellow Trump supporters. In fact, Rufo was the same person who had advised our disgraced white nationalist ex-president to ban federal DEI trainings, a chillingly racist policy which has thankfully been rescinded by our new administration. To quote award-winning journalist Lydia Polgreen, just as fake news really means reporting I don't like, and cancel culture means accountability I don't like, CRT means any conversation about race I don't like. I'm sure there are those in attendance tonight who don't appreciate my being political about these important issues, but as I learned in a summer DEI training session as a member of my school's newly formed Equity and Diversity Committee, the work of educational equity is indeed political, as politics shape every aspect of our education system, including this very meeting. So to our board and central administration, I hope you'll continue to act like the educated professionals you are, put our students first, and not cave to the anti-mask, anti-vax, anti-science, anti-DEI crowd. I promise you that regardless of this evening's turnout, there are more of us than there are of them in our community. Let's certainly hope so, at least for our children's sake. And since I have a little bit of time, I'd like to express my disappointment at the behavior of some of these so-called adults in the room. Before the meeting started, an announcement was made asking that all in attendance please make sure that masks are on over both the nose and the mouth. There was loud sighing, with one woman even loudly exclaiming, "You gotta be kidding me." A few people in the room blatantly defied the request. As you can see, some of them still have their masks below their noses. When the first gentleman from Island spoke in support of the mask mandate, a man nearby me began to boo him, even remarking, "I'm about to punch this guy in the face." "Are you serious?" I asked him. "Yeah," he replied. These are the folks who should be ashamed of themselves. A terrible example for our kids. So once again, thank you to the board, central administration. Keep doing what's right.
Good evening. James Ward from Seawarren. I'm not going to take a lot of your time. That was very fancy speaking. Well done. This is the guy that also didn't stand to pledge allegiance when we were all asked to. He just sat there in his chair and stared at the ground. So I'd just like to bring that up. Anyway, for what we're all here for, though, the masks. I'm not going to get into this crazy masking thing. These people think you got to wear them, think you don't got to wear them. Common sense. Think of it logically. These people are out in stores. These kids are playing together every day before and after school. You go out to restaurants, these places are all packed. There is no reason why the children should have to wear masks in schools all day. The same people here that are asking for these kids not to wear, or to wear masks are probably the same people that are out doing recreational activities with their kids completely unmasked. Some may not, some may be. But it's personal choice, whether you want a mask or not. I, for one, obviously don't want to. I don't want my child to. But if you do want your child to, by all means do it. This is just government overreach. There is no reason why any of this should be mandated. It should be personal choice. And I'm asking the board, imploring you just to get on board with the other boards that have done this and write your letters to the governor and tell him that the people don't want it. Because the majority of the people do not want it, and hopefully that will be shown today. That's all I got. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Bill Nebel from Seawarren, taxpayer. I'm just curious, I wasn't here earlier when you passed the curriculum adoption. I'm just curious what the, what's going to be taught to our kids under this DEI. Is there any kind of a program that you could share with us, or is there something you could hand out to tell us exactly how the kids are going to be taught and what they're going to be taught?
I'll respond to your questions when you're done speaking, sir, because I don't want to interrupt your 5 minutes.
All right. Well, no, that's my major thought. I mean, the mask and everything else, you know, the gentleman just talked about politicizing everything. I think he did a good job of doing it for his side of the argument. And all the scientific things that have been proposed here or put out, a lot of it is a bunch of baloney if you look at the science. But, you know, I know you have to follow the state, so Mr. Murphy's making his choices. That's all. I wanted to get to the, to the DEI information.
Sure. So I'm going to answer your question. What is diversity, equity, and inclusion? And where does it what is its place in our schools? So in March 2021, it was signed into law, and the legislation requires school districts to include instruction on diversity and inclusion as part of our New Jersey student learning standards. Under the law, the instruction will highlight and promote diversity, and the instruction will also examine the impact that unconscious bias and economic disparities have on both an individual level and on a society as a whole, while encouraging a safe, welcoming, inclusive environment for all students, regardless of race, ethnicity, sexual or gender identities, mental and physical disabilities, socioeconomic status, and religious beliefs.
That all sounds good, but again, what's the actual curriculum? What are you going to? How is it going to be taught, and how is it going to be disseminated to the children?
So
I mean, this doesn't really say anything. It's just a lot of broad statements, and what you just read is the same thing. I mean, I want to know what the meat and potatoes is, if you will. What is it really going to be? How is these classes going to be set up? What's the books they're going to be reading? Who are the authors? I know you have a list in here of other books, but I don't know if there's any of them that are, you don't really tell anybody what the stories are or what the books are about. So it's really a meaningless list, okay, unless you want to Google everything, I guess. But I'm just saying, I think as a taxpayer, I'd like to see that detail, because what you're talking about here is a broad brush. I grew up in the 60s, okay, and we went through a lot of stuff back then. I'm just curious about how you're going to treat this and how it's going to be disseminated to the children. Is it going to be an adversarial atmosphere? That's what I'm really concerned about. We come a long way, 50 years or more, okay, and I can't see us tearing it apart.
Dr. Massimino?
Sir, the last thing we want is an adversarial environment in our classrooms. I'm going to refer to the same document from our school boards who gives our policy, and I'm going to say this before I turn it over. We're trying to create a safe, welcoming, inclusive environment for all students regardless of race, ethnicity, sexual or gender identities, mental and physical disabilities, socioeconomic status, and religious beliefs. So inclusion covers a large body of topics that are central to what we do as educators. I'm going to defer to our Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion to speak to the specifics, but what I will say is this, because I've had several conversations with parents. The last thing we're going to do is rush into anything without making sure that we are not only following this, but we're also being responsible to our students and our community. And by that I mean what Ms. Anderson read in terms of how curriculum committees are put together, how those ideas are shared, how they have to be board approved before they can be put into a curriculum guide. And we're also working on the training, which was also approved tonight, to ensure that the teachers are comfortable having these conversations with our students. So that being said, there's not a document of this is diversity. Diversity is something that is if it's done correctly, it's embedded and it's a part of the appropriate lessons. And I say appropriate because obviously each grade level mandates a different level of appropriateness due to the sheer age of the children. So we're taking a very deliberate, pragmatic approach with this for no small part, but to address the concerns everybody has anytime we roll out new curriculum.
Well, if I could make a suggestion, when we come to these meetings, it's like a broad brush. You know, you get generalities. You really can't tell me what the course is going to be.
The reason there's nothing to share, there's not a curriculum guide that says this is how we're going to teach diversity. There are lessons that we embed into the curriculum. So
what are you embedding in the curriculum? That's
So
what I'm getting at. I mean, you know, if you don't have a plan, or there's no curriculum, no layout of the program,
we're working on the
is it going to be up to
curriculum.
every teacher to decide how they're going to do it?
No, sir. The curriculum is a living document. So it's continuously updated as new things come out and new things are published. We want to make sure they're properly vetted.
Well, then are you going to share that with the public?
As soon, I'm going to defer to Mr. Ali, but rest assured, when we have something to share, and there's enough teachers in the back that know that every grade level, every content area, and I just want to share this with you because you may not be aware,
Yeah.
every content area has a curriculum guide. So your average elementary teacher that is teaching a half a dozen subjects has a half a dozen curriculum guides. Now you extrapolate that through 13 grade levels, including kindergarten. Every subject we teach has its own curriculum guide.
Can I just ask something?
Absolutely,
So
sir.
what you're saying is when you're going to embed it into the excuse me? Somebody say something?
You can finish your question, but your time is up. Finish your question.
Oh, thank you for cutting me off. I just want to know, when you say you're going to embed this in the curriculum, you're talking about every subject, so you can't be specific? It's going to be a list of stuff that you're going to give to the teachers, or how are you going to do this? Everybody could be a DEI
I'll let Mr.
expert?
Ali share the specifics that you're looking for.
But I just want to make sure that, is there something I can review, or as you go along this program, we can share with the public?
I'll let Mr. Ali respond to your
I
question.
know one other thing, if I may. I noticed you had a disbursement to Dive In Consulting. What do they do?
They're going to
They're going to help you with the curriculum?
I'm sorry?
Are they going to help you with the curriculum? Are they the ones working on this?
They're training our staff.
So they're the ones that are, what, embedding it?
No, they're training our staff.
So they're the ones that are indoctrinating the teachers?
No, what I'm saying is they're training the staff and the administration. Mr. Ali?
First and foremost, I want to thank you for your question. That is a good one, and one that's been on the minds of many community members. As Dr. Massimino stated, the last thing that we want to do is rush into this. And the committee that we're forming to actually take on this work includes a broad spectrum of educators, including school counselors, including members of our high school team, elementary, middle school, to make sure that anything that we do is developmentally appropriate. With that being said, the legislative mandate that was just read also includes the requirement that New Jersey Department of Education release samples to provide guidance to the districts in terms of how these concepts will be embedded. As we do with everything that we do, we want to make sure that we're following the New Jersey Student Learning Standards and that things are implemented in accordance with the state. That being said, we want to make sure that we do address what is within our locus of control, which is the training. So while we are waiting for the state to provide that mandated guidance that they need to do in accordance with the legislative mandate, we are putting together a series of workshops aimed at providing training so that when that curriculum does come into existence, our teachers are ready to implement it. In terms of putting something out before the public, in the coming days, you can expect to see a draft of the framework, one of the frameworks that will be used in terms of our education regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's something that
will likely be on the district website in the coming days, likely before the week is up. So that framework really is grounded in research. It provides the students opportunities to come up with questions, to research potential solutions, and then develop action plans to implement that. So you will have something likely in the coming days that you are able to see, something tangible that describes how we will address these topics. In terms of the infusion throughout the curriculum, we definitely want to make sure to get guidance from the state and also provide training so that our educators are able to implement whatever it is that they develop.
So, again, I appreciate your explanation.
Okay, sir, your time is up.
Well, you cut me right off now, huh, when I'm getting into discussion.
He answered your question, and your time is up.
Excuse me. Thank you very much, Mr. Darling, Ms. Anderson, Board Director.
Good evening. I'm Anna Masenik, and I'm from Ford's. I'm a grandmother, and I have grandchildren in the district here. And I'm very grateful that you're following the governor's mandate to have everyone in schools wear masks. I believe that that is a measured step, a good measured step to get children back in school where they need to be. I'm very happy they're going back to school. You know, it's important for them to be there, but they have to be safe. And I think the biggest mitigation was when they shut down the schools. That's one of the things that kept them safe all these months during this pandemic. Bringing them back slowly and carefully is the thing that you have to do, and you're doing it. So congratulations. Good job. Thank you.
The chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. I have a motion by Mr. Treewasser.
These are just quick, easy ones.
I have a motion by Mr. Treewasser,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Velez. All in favor? Aye. Motion carried. Adjourned.